Okay, so in the past we've talked about cities and terrain tiles and how cities get their food production and trade from the tiles around them. Let's let's do a little deeper dive into how to look at a certain area and figure out food and how many citizens the city will be able to support after it's fully grown and the land is fully improved, and a good technique for quickly analyzing that. So let's look at the city, Marion Island. Now, we know that every citizen is going to require 2 food. So if we add up all of the food tiles, all the food that can come from the tiles, and we see that the most food that's in this area is 20 food, then we know that this city will never be able to grow past 10 citizens. Cities can get upwards of 20 cities, or sorry, 20 citizens, and even more than that with enough food. So the way to look at this is what I ask myself is, can this tile support a citizen's working it by itself? So we know that it takes 2 food to support each citizen. Now, plains are going to give you 1 food, but 2 food after they're irrigated. Grassland is going to give you 2 food, 3 after it's irrigated. So when I'm analyzing the total food available, I think in terms of, well, what is it going to produce after it's irrigated? Because you will end up irrigating every tile. That all of your plains, your grasslands, and possibly your deserts. So when a plains has been irrigated, it will provide 2 food, which means that the citizen that's working it, for example, this one with the river here, so the plains after it being irrigated will give 2 food, 1 production, and 1 trade from the river, and 2 trade once you have a road built on it as well. So the production and the trade are beneficial to the empire. But that 2 food will make sure that that citizen that's working this plains tile will have no net positive or negative effect on the food of the city. He's working that tile, and the food that's coming off is feeding him. So let's think about this forest tile over here. And the same also goes for the hills, because hills and forests each give only 1 food. But they give a lot of production, forests and hills. Forests automatically by themselves, hills only after you build a mine on them. But if they only give 1 food, then the citizen who's working it, that tile won't even yield enough food to feed that citizen that's working it. So that means that it needs to get an additional 1 food from somewhere else, from a citizen who's working a tile that puts out a surplus. And your surplus is almost always, pretty much only, well, you have your special tiles, like this plains with the wheat on it. After that's irrigated, that will put out 3 food, which means that 2 will go to the citizen that's working it, and you'll have a surplus of 1 that can go somewhere. But most of the time, if there's no special resources around like wheat or fish or whales, your surplus is primarily going to come from grassland tiles. Once they're irrigated, they will give 3 food, and so 1 surplus food that the citizen that's working the tile will not need to eat, because he'll only take 2 of the 3. So the way that I look at these is I assign each tile a number. If there's a surplus of 1 after irrigation, like a grassland, I consider that a +1 tile. A plains tile after irrigated will give 2 food, so I consider that a 0 tile. Forests, hills, jungles, those are those are -1 tiles, because they're only going to put out one food. So ideally, we want the production from these forests and the hills, but they don't put out enough food to support somebody working them. They only put out one. So what I do is I go through and I count up the number of -1 tiles that there are. And we can go ahead and ignore the forest that the city's on, because the city automatically works that by itself without a citizen. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 7 -1 tiles. So that means that if we want to work citizens to work all of those, we're going to need 7 +1 tiles. So let's see how many +1 tiles we have. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, because the wheat adds an extra food. So, actually double check that. You know, the wheat actually adds an extra 2 food, so the wheat here, the only reason it's not getting more is because we're in despotism. So we're getting that -1. But outside of despotism, once you graduate to the later types of government, this would actually be a +2 tile after irrigation. But for the sake of what we're dealing with now, let's go ahead and assume this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 +1 tiles. Well, we have 7 -1 tiles. So that means that that after the city is fully grown, that 2 of these tiles between the forest and the hills there simply won't be enough food to work those. Now, desert here, with the oil on it, you cannot, you can, what you're going to end up doing is you're going to end up mining that. And when you have a mine built on something, you can't have irrigation and a mine built there at the same time. So when we mine this, that means that no irrigation will be possible there. So that makes the desert actually a -2 tile. So in reality, we're actually dealing with a +5 situation from our surplus tiles and a minus, what was it? It was a minus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, a -9. So that means that some of these tiles, there just simply will not be the food to work it. Your ocean tiles appear to be a -1 tile because they only put out one food, but after you build a harbor, which is an early technology, harbors give +1 food to all ocean tiles, so they're actually a 0 tile. So that's a good way to look at it. Don't just build in an area and assume like, oh, there's hills all over the place, I'll be able to work all these. Add up how many -1 or even -2 tiles there are, and then make sure that you have an equal number of +1 or +2 tiles to bring that to 0. And most of the time you won't. That there will be a couple tiles that there simply won't be the food to work, but when you do the math like that, you at least understand what you'll be able to work and what you won't. The one other thing about deserts is that deserts usually are very unproductive from a food production and trade standpoint. When you have oil on them, that's super helpful for production. That puts out a lot of production, so those tiles are very useful. However, normally they give, I think it's zeros in all categories. Okay, no, they automatically give 1 production. Yeah, so deserts give 1 production, so there is a little something to them. But what you're normally going to be doing with deserts is building a road on them to add 1 trade to it, and then irrigating them as well to put 1 food on it to make it a -1 tile instead of a -2 tile. That way, if you have enough +1 tiles around or +2 tiles, you can work the desert and get that 1 production from the desert tile itself and the 1 trade from the road built on it. But when you have the desert or the oil on it, you're not going to be able to irrigate it because you're going to want to mine that to increase the production of it. So that's going to be a -2 tile. So you're going to need a lot of surplus food to be able to work those desert tiles. And that is the basic system that I use to quickly look at an area and figure out if there's enough food here to make building worth it. And we'll go ahead and leave it there.